Welcome back to the Nutrition Made Simple podcast. At Healthy Steps Nutrition, we believe something as fundamental as nutrition shouldn't be complicated, which is why we focus on a simple, habit-based approach. Our coaching program just isn't about telling you what to eat. We look at a holistic approach. Your support system, stress management, sleep, mindset, exercise, and of course, your lifestyle. All of these factors will help you create healthy habits to truly transform your health and your life. My name's Nicole Aucoin. I'm the founder of Healthy Steps Nutrition, CrossFit HSN, and HSN Mentoring. I'm also the author of the Healthy Kids Cookbook, 100% kid-approved recipes the entire family will love. We actually released this kids cookbook a year ago this month as part of our twins' 10th birthday. You'll find pictures of them throughout the cookbook. Kids and families absolutely love it. Again, you can find it on Amazon. In this podcast, we will be teaching you how to take one step at a time to become the healthiest version of yourself. Today's guest is one of my fellow dietitians at our Healthy Steps Nutrition HQ location, Amanda Haar. She is the expert in today's podcast topic, all about reframing and refocusing. This topic is vital because if you're not able to do this, you will see a roadblock as a failure and you're going to stop your nutrition plan. You're going to think, this isn't working for me, and you're going to go right back to your old habits. By mastering this skill, you'll be able to see a roadblock as an opportunity, learn from it, see it from a different perspective, and move on to create this healthy lifestyle. We will get to this episode right after this message. Man, I have to tell you, last week was probably in the top 5 weeks of my career since opening up Healthy Steps Nutrition. We wrapped up a corporate wellness challenge at Delbrook JKS Construction, and we actually started a nutrition program with them back in 2018. We launched another employee wellness challenge this time, and there was so much more engagement. The employees were all supporting each other. They all saw really good results, and they, most importantly, kept saying the same thing. It was awesome that we were all supporting each other. This program was so easy. That's exactly what we wanted people to say. Your nutrition program shouldn't be overwhelming. You shouldn't feel like you're missing out when you're following a nutrition plan. You need to create healthy habits and a healthy lifestyle. We were actually able to celebrate one of the guys, Josh, who's coming on the podcast next week. We were able to celebrate with him losing over 100 pounds. I have goosebumps now just thinking back to that moment. It was so awesome. We captured his story, the HR director and the owner, Mike. We captured their stories. It was just so incredible to capture their stories and help their employees make health a way of life. You can click the link in the show notes to see all of those stories. And if you work for a company who offers employee wellness or is looking to offer employee wellness, we would love to help you. You can click the link in the show notes to find more about our employee wellness program, or go to hireanutritioncoach.com to find a Healthy Steps Nutrition coach near you. You can also book a free discovery call with me if you are the owner or HR director, so we can learn a little bit more about your company and see if our program would be a good fit for you at this time. All right, let's get to this episode on reframing and refocusing. Enjoy. Amanda Haar, welcome back to the Nutrition Made Simple podcast.
Thanks for having me again, Nicole. It's great to be here.
I'm super excited today. I have a feeling I'm going to learn a lot. Today we are talking about reframing nutrition and health setbacks, learning from the experiences to reach your health and wellness goals. That's a lot.
That is a lot. And I'm so excited to dive in because, this is essential, right? Like, progress is never a straight line. We always are going to have great times when we're making lots of healthy choices, and then times where honestly life gets ahead of us and we're not making the best choices. So it's how we recover from that and how we move forward with our thinking patterns and habits that are really going to make the difference in us achieving our goals.
So I would say that I'm a little bit late to the party with really focusing on this as part of my nutrition wellness coaching perspective, but you actually took a course quite some time ago on intrinsic coaching, basically all of this stuff to be able to help your clients.
Yeah, it was life-changing for me personally. I mean, in our degree as a dietitian, we do motivational interviewing, and everything like that. But this really encouraged me to dive so much deeper into the fact that our thinking patterns control so much of what we do, and we are dynamic. So, when I was little or when I was younger, I used to think a person is who they are. They're not going to change very much. But this kind of opened my eyes to the fact that every experience that a person has informs their next steps. So we're very dynamic. We're always changing. And if we can help our clients or help our friends, help our neighbors, whoever it is, support their best thinking, then there's really just endless opportunities for change.
I love that. And I think it's something that you have to be super intentional about because, we have these like grooves in our brain, right? And it's easy to go down a path if we've been through that path before and know like, oh, history is going to repeat itself. This is going to happen. But maybe we can look at it from a different perspective. And to get prepared for this podcast, I actually looked up the definition of reframing because we're going to use it quite a bit during this podcast. And cognitive reframing is a technique used to shift your mindset so that you are able to look at a situation, person, or relationship from a slightly different perspective. So basically, you're able to look at something that's happened or a person and be like, oh, well, maybe the initial thought that I had is not the reality.
Yep. And it's really cool how if we can create space between our initial thoughts and our reactions or our continuing thoughts, then we can start to make those changes with that little space that we're able to create for ourselves with that awareness.
I think it's crucial. I think sometimes, and I'm sure we've all had this happen before, where something will happen and we react and you're like, oh, maybe that wasn't the best scenario, right? Like I know it's definitely happened to me before. And, you take that as a learning experience. Okay, next time this happens, I will do things slightly differently. Or, you could get in this like vicious cycle of just keep replaying this thing over and over again and beat yourself up for it.
Definitely. And that's why I love, what we do a lot with clients, right? Because nutrition is very much mental and emotional, even more than physical, is really kind of talking through, how can we think more forward in that direction and learn from our experiences. So if we do something that, was not helpful to meet our goals, instead of treating it as this really awful thing and as a failure, how can we think about it as something that we can learn from so we can turn it into a positive?
I love that. Before we dive into like some practical examples of, okay, I fell off, let's get some examples of reframing. So let's pretend we have someone who's a super busy professional. We work with a lot of professional CEOs in our company at Healthy Steps Nutrition. What happens when someone's like, hey, I'm really busy right now with work and like my nutrition, health, all this stuff is being put to the side because I'm really busy with work right now.
Yeah. And when we can look at that from a little bit different perspective of, if we are able to support your nutrition and that helps your thinking patterns, your productivity, your health, and your wellness, that is going to make you exponentially more productive in the long term because we've supported your health. Because if you're sick or if you're not feeling well, not having much energy, that's even more of an uphill battle to do all the work that we want to be doing.
I mean, like practical things, right? Like we're super busy. We don't get enough sleep. But when we know if we don't get enough sleep, then our cortisol levels, our stress hormones going to be higher. Our leptin and ghrelin, the hormones that make us full and satisfied, and the hormone that makes us hungry are going to be all out of whack. So we're going to be less satisfied with the food that we eat, more stressed and more hungry. It's like not a good combination if we're trying to meet some health and wellness goals, right?
Exactly. You're right. And that's why I love it when we can like be aware of that, and sometimes it's a cascade, sometimes life is so busy that we're not getting sleep, we're not eating well. It's kind of a cascade. So that's where like that lowest hanging fruit can really start to turn that dial if we're focusing on sleep and we're only getting 4 hours of sleep at night.
It's funny. So in our CrossFit gym, we ask nutrition questions of the day regularly. And Saturdays is typically always a nutrition question of the day because there's the most amount of people in those classes. And then Jason and I are always there and we just kind of probe the conversation a little bit more. And last week we had a question that, what is a food that makes you feel sluggish afterwards? So going back to the CEO, right? Like, okay, if we're eating foods that make us feel sluggish, makes us not have enough energy, we probably want to avoid those if we're trying to be a productive CEO, right?
Totally. Yep.
Can you guess what the majority of people said? You were not there in this class.
No. Oh, man. Donuts?
Super close. I mean, all the sugar, right? There was a specific ice cream store that a lot of our members frequent occasionally, and then ice cream. And basically anything with sugar was named. Almost every single person said something related to sugar. There was one person that said something related to pizza, and one other person said broccoli. And I was like, that's interesting. But everyone else, it was all related to sugar. And the cool thing is when you can start connecting the dots between what you eat and how you feel and how you sleep, it becomes, okay, actually, I don't want to feel this way, so I'm not going to eat that thing.
Totally. That makes that reframing so much easier, right? Because you're coming into that decision with a more information. And I love that really with clients, especially when we're working more on food sensitivities or, conquering a bit more complex conditions. It's like once you're empowered with that information, it makes it so much easier to avoid those foods because we have that physical response to it. But a lot of times we're not even being aware of physical responses. So it's hard for us to make those decisions. So if I'm not thinking I have an adverse effect to something, why should I avoid it? But once you tune in and figure out which foods are problematic for you, it makes it so much easier to, make positive choices more often.
And say no to the things that you might not actually want because you're like, no, I actually don't want to feel that way after, so I'm good, I'm fine skipping it. And you're satisfied, right? Because at the end of the day, you don't want to feel like you're missing out. And when you do, that's what causes people to crave more and more things.
Definitely. Yep. That feeling of satisfaction. Exactly.
Okay, so let's kind of shift the conversation to what happens when you fall off. We know that progress is not a straight line, but you need to learn how to reflect, learn, and then move the heck on. So let's talk about what happens when someone falls off. I know you have like a recent scenario.
Yeah. So a client the other day, she was really just feeling like a failure, and we hate to use those words, right? Because you're not a failure, but she just really felt like she was failing, had gone back to doing Uber Eats. And so this is a really good opportunity. And I honestly love these opportunities to use this as a teachable moment. So instead of feeling like a failure, we talk about, what can you learn from that situation that you can take forward with you? And really what is important to you in this moment? And honestly, that sounds like such a subjective question, right? Like a simple question. But anytime we ask that question, that's very, very powerful because when we focus on what's important to us, that helps realign our goals and where we want to be going so we can get to our destination better.
So she felt like a failure. Let's end this story loop. So you talked to her about it, and what happened with that conversation?
Yeah, so we kind of talked about, how can we make changes moving forward, but also, we kind of dug into her own thinking patterns because for a lot of people, we tend to be a little bit more perfectionist and we think that we have to be all or nothing. I have to do all the things or I'm completely failing. So that really gave us an opportunity to actually look more into something that's causing stress in other areas of her life too, and really just focusing on first, we need to make the step of, feeling okay with doing some rather than all the things. And that is what is necessary for consistent and sustainable changes.
I love that. I think, at the end of the day, you got to give yourself a little grace. And when we look at the research, we know that if you just focus on one thing at a time, you're going to be over 80% successful maintaining that one habit after a year. But when you try to do 2, 3, 4 things, it's like less than 5% success rate. So you have to slow down to be able to speed up your progress, essentially.
Definitely. And it's funny because some people that I work with weekly, we find that there are points that even when we're building one step at a time, week by week, we have to have a maintenance week, right? Like just making sure that we are staying consistent with the habits that we've changed. And that's a really fun time too, because you can reflect on your progress and see your successes and even just the habits that you've maintained. And then, feel for you to move forward whenever you're ready for that.
I love that. So, okay, let's dive in. So you've got, in my opinion, and there might be more things, but people fall off, right? And there's like the mental side of it. So feeling like a failure, right? And we just talked about, okay, how do we overcome that? There's the physical side of it, right? Okay, you fall off and you have a bad weekend or you get out of the routine of exercising. Physically, your body feels different.
Yep. And so that's interesting because sometimes we'll see that on the in-body scans, right? Like if someone comes in and has an in-body scan and does not show the results that we're expecting, we can also turn that into a really positive experience because it shows us that we do need to become more consistent with some habits that we have been working on. So it's really interesting to see how that conversation can change from, oh, I didn't see the results that I wanted to see, to what can we, dig into further in order to see more results in the right direction the next time around.
I love that. I was actually having a conversation this morning with someone, and she said, her husband was out of town last week for a work trip. And she said, Nicole, he gained 5 pounds in a week. And I looked at her, I go, it's physically not possible for this guy to gain 5 pounds of fat in 1 week. Like, let me explain to you why it's not physically possible. He does not eat that much. And I'll tell you what probably happened. He ate a lot more sodium than he had. He drank a little bit more than he usually drinks, and his body's retaining a lot more fluid. I said, I guarantee by the end of this week, he'll be back down those 5 pounds of water weight that he's gained, right? So I think if you're only looking at just a number on a scale as your point of success, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure.
Definitely. And you know what comes up for me is I had a good conversation the other day with one of my clients who is very interested in, women's health along with nutrition. And we were talking about the fact that even throughout a woman's cycle, we might gain up to 3 pounds from, ovulation time to the time just before our period, just because our body naturally retains more water. So if we're testing or we're weighing ourselves or doing biometrics at different points throughout our cycle, we might think, why is my weight actually going up? Because you're retaining more water then too. So I think that's a really important thing for women to realize too, because we don't have the same hormonal balance as men do. Therefore, our weight patterns do not reflect that as well.
And I think that's one thing I love about having our in-body machine is that we test people and it shows hydration, it shows water retention. So we can see when the number on the scale might not reflect exactly the way we would think it would go. We're like, okay, that's the first thing I look at. I'm like, okay, what was your water weight before in the previous scan and what is it today? And 9 times out of 10, their water weight is different, like significantly different, which would cause the scan readings to be different.
Definitely. Yep. There's so many factors to look into with that. And and I just love how you can turn really any experience into a positive so that you can move forward into more progress versus kind of, failing yourself with that.
Absolutely. So we talked about when we fall off, there's, the mental side of it, and we don't want anyone to feel like a failure. Like, let's learn from the experience. Let's move on. There's the physical side of it where it's like, hey, I'm not feeling well, or maybe my biometrics aren't changing. I'm not sleeping as well because I'm not doing all these things that I was prioritizing before. But then there's the health side. And I think that's my personal passion, right? Like we invest time, energy into improving our health. That's the end goal, right? Like to be the healthiest version of ourselves so that we prevent chronic disease, which up to over 60% of the US population has at least one chronic disease. So, our goal is to invest the time into, your nutrition, your sleep, your stress management, exercise, that support system to get yourself to become the healthiest version of yourself.
Mm-hmm. And that's where I love, always going back to what is your goal? What is important to you in this moment? And even I know you had a podcast recently that, someone mentioned like, even what is your mission in life and how does this goal of yours play into that mission of your life? Because when our goals are aligned with our values, it just makes it so much more powerful to make those changes to get there.
I love that. I think as a coach, it's on us to help clients get to that. And for every person, it's a little bit different. But I could say I see themes when I talk to people, when we ask, okay, what's important for you? And, especially moms, right? So, the surface thing is always, I want to lose, 10 pounds. I want to lose 15 pounds. I want to lose 20 pounds. I want to get into this section of my closet. Okay, why is that section important to you, right? And then it comes down to confidence usually. But then we start looking at the other factors. Okay, let's say you lose the 30 pounds. What will happen in your life then? And then it's like this awesome light bulb goes off. I think that's my favorite part of consultations because then they start picturing themselves like, okay, I've done the thing. I've worked really hard. I've gotten to the point. Now what in my life is going to be different? And then we start hearing the real why, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, all the things like I can run and play with my kids. I can have more energy to play with my kids. And that is a huge one, right? Like you've created these amazing human beings, but then if you feel all tired and sluggish all the time, you really can't enjoy them. So even the fact that when we have more energy, we can enjoy our children and pour more into them, like the saying, you can't pour from an empty cup, like that is so powerful.
I love that. And then, I think a lot of parents tell me, hey, I want my kids to I want to model healthy behaviors for my kids. I don't want them learning at 40, 50, however old they are, what healthy eating and healthy habits look like. I want them to learn now so that they can be set up for success in the future. And when we look at childhood obesity rates, they're only exponentially going up. And I think if more parents realized, hey, you are the model for your kids, then they wouldn't have to go up.
Definitely. Yep, exactly. Because honestly, even when I'm working with someone who's 60, 70, 80 years old, like the longer we maintain certain habits, the harder it is to change them. So if kids are going to see their parents modeling healthy behaviors, and when parents model healthy behaviors, naturally the kids eat better because that probably means that they're going through drive-throughs less and getting fast food for the family less, cooking at home. So it just all snowballs in this positive manner.
I love that. I think my favorite story to date is from CrossFit Brighton. We'll have to link the video below this recording if you click the link in the show notes. But I know I've mentioned this story a few times, but this guy, Brent, he loses 100 pounds, and we were talking about what his why was, and he, said he wanted to be healthy, blah, blah, blah. He goes, but the coolest thing happened after I lost the 100 pounds, and I would have never thought about this. He's like, I used to really be embarrassed flying, right? Because he would have to ask for the seatbelt extender and he would be taking over more than one seat, right? I'm sure, we've all kind of been on a plane and sat next to a person where, you're a little bit more squished. And he's like, I know people didn't want to sit next to me. And he goes, I lost the 100 pounds and I got on a plane and I fit comfortably in the plane. I did not have to ask for a seatbelt extender. And he's like, that to me was like, holy cow, this year that I've invested so much time and energy into changing all these habits and money into getting nutrition coaching, getting fitness coaching at CrossFit Brighton and doing all the things like this is what life is about now. Like his whole life has changed and things that he would have never even thought about. Like, oh, I'm not going to have to ask for a seatbelt extender anymore. Now he's like, man, I'm so proud of that.
Wow. I can't even imagine how that feels. Like how empowering to know that you've done the work, made those successes and just feeling it, mentally, emotionally, physically, that's exciting.
So I was so inspired by the story that I reached out to the coach and I was like, I want you on the podcast, on the Grow Your Nutrition Business podcast, the coaching business nutrition side of our business. I was like, I want you on this podcast to actually share the story of how it was working with this guy. And in that was probably my favorite episode to date. So she was actually a flight attendant prior to becoming a nutrition coach, which I did not know. And she goes, Nicole, I've had to give seatbelt extenders, and I have goosebumps right now just telling this story. But she said, I've had to give seatbelt extenders to people, and I could just feel the embarrassment that they have to ask when asking that. And my heart is just so happy and fulfilled that this guy doesn't have to do that anymore. And he'll never have to do it again.
That's amazing. That's so cool that she could have not quite empathy, right? Like she wasn't the person in the seat, but she's been there and she's seen that over and over and over again. And how exciting to her as a coach to keep doing this good work.
Yeah. She actually cried on the podcast because she got so emotional about the whole thing. And I was like, okay, well, this is the first time that's happened. But it's just, obviously as a coach, when you're helping someone, you're invested in their journey. You want to see them succeed almost as much as they do, right? We're your cheerleaders for a year or longer, we want you to become this best version of yourself. And when you do such significant changes like that, gosh, you're just so proud as a coach of hey, all of your hard work is paying off.
Yes. And kind of to the reframing end of that, I love when my clients reach out when they feel like they're struggling, because there's nothing worse than, having a coach, but not reaching out when you feel like you're struggling, because then we can't help you. And when they feel comfortable reaching out either through the app messaging, if it's between appointments or at appointments, that just opens up the possibilities of our conversation because we know exactly, what's going on in your mind and your heart and what you're struggling with, so we can help you kind of take a step back and maybe find a totally different step that we would have planned upon if we hadn't talked about that issue.
And I think that really comes to the last point, right? It's not if you'll fall off. It's not when you'll fall off. It's how quickly will you get back on track. And I would challenge everyone listening to the podcast that if you have someone, if you have a support system, if you have a coach, it will be exponentially easier for you to get back on track and reframe the situation because you have an outsider's perspective.
Definitely. I mean, you think about it, right? Like in AA, people have sponsors. In a lot of parts of life, it helps us to have someone to be accountable to and to have support. So yes, whether it's a coach, family member, friend, whoever's going to help you have that accountability and you can be open and honest with them, that's just going to really help kind of dig you out of situations where sometimes we overthink things and are a little bit too hard on ourselves.
I love that. I mean, we're wrapping up this podcast. Any final thoughts for people as we talk about reframing and setbacks and learning from experiences to reach your goals?
Yeah. I mean, any of those moments where you feel like you're kind of going in a negative spiral of your thinking pattern, really just, starting to be aware of that and taking a step back. And even if it's giving yourself an extra moment of thinking, how am I going to respond to this situation? Like, how do I want my mindset to be? That can be a huge difference between kind of continuing the spiral downwards or giving yourself grace and then moving forward in a positive direction.
I love that. Thank you for all that you do. And thank you for coming on today's podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Nicole.
I hope you enjoyed that episode with Amanda. It's so clear that she's passionate about helping people make health a way of life and truly learn from the situations that they're put in and just to become a better version of themselves. One thing that we talked about is looking back and looking at a different perspective and figuring out what can we learn from this, what went well, what can we improve and move on. I think sometimes when we are focusing on just a diet or being super restrictive, we'll beat ourselves up if we don't go 100% perfect. But in reality, you don't have to go 100% to make one step closer to becoming the healthiest version of yourself. You can just move 1% each day and be so much better off and not regain the weight that you worked so hard to lose. So, as always, one actionable tip. Today, I want you to identify one person who's going to help you. Who's going to keep you accountable? Who's that positive light that's going to help you get back on track or see that different perspective? Whether it be a mental health counselor, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a family member, or maybe you actually need to hire a coach. Maybe you're thinking, you know what? It's time. I'm ready. I'm ready to invest my time, energy, and money into becoming the best version of myself. We would absolutely love to help you. You can click the link in the show notes to apply for coaching at our Healthy Steps Nutrition headquarters location, or you can go to hireanutritioncoach.com to find a Healthy Steps Nutrition coach near you. I am so unbelievably excited about next week's episode with Josh. He lost 102 pounds since 2018. You want to talk about roadblocks? We are going to be diving into some of the roadblocks that he had to overcome, some of the obstacles, and who was there to actually help him and navigate that journey. So make sure you check back into next week's episode on Nutrition Made Simple. If you're loving this podcast, please subscribe, leave us a review so that this podcast can reach more people. We'll see you back here next week.